Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you for a minute because this right here will change how you see relationships forever. Most people think power comes from talking more, explaining more, or giving more. That's wrong. Power comes from knowing when to pull back and letting someone feel what it's like to lose access to you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me slow this thing down and really talk to you because this first point right here is something most people completely misunderstand. Men notice distance more than words. You can explain yourself 100 times, send paragraphs, pour your heart out, and still not be heard. But the moment your energy shifts, the moment your presence changes, that's when it hits. That's when it lands. See, men don't always process emotions through conversation the way women do. A man may nod his head while you're talking, but that doesn't mean the message sinks in. Words can blend together. Words can be ignored. Words can be dismissed as emotion. But distance is felt. Distance creates a void. And human beings feel absence far more deeply than they hear explanations. When you stop texting first, when you stop checking in, when you stop trying to keep the connection alive by yourself, it doesn't go unnoticed. Even if he doesn't say anything at first, his mind starts to register that something is different. Your laughter isn't showing up. Your energy isn't filling the space. Your attention is no longer guaranteed, and that silence becomes loud. Most women think if a man pulls back, the solution is to lean in harder. They think effort will fix it. They think love means proving yourself. But what actually happens is the opposite. Over-explaining teaches a man that you'll always be there, no matter how little he gives. Distance, on the other hand, teaches him what life feels like without you. When you match his distance, you're not trying to punish him. You're simply responding to reality. You're saying, if this is the level of energy you're bringing, then this is the level I'm giving back. And that mirror forces awareness. Men are very aware of shifts in access. When the door that was always open suddenly isn't, curiosity kicks in. He starts asking himself questions he never asked before. Why isn't she calling? Why isn't she checking on me? Why doesn't she seem bothered? And that's when the emotional processing begins. Not when you're begging for clarity, not when you're asking where you stand, but when your presence becomes uncertain. Distance disrupts comfort, and comfort is where effort dies. When a man feels secure that you'll always be there regardless of how he shows up, he relaxes into complacency. But when you remove that guarantee, he has to reassess his position. He has to decide if he's willing to step up or walk away. Now, here's the part that's hard for people to accept. Distance doesn't make a man lose interest. Distance reveals the level of interest that was already there. If he truly values you, your absence will bother him. It will push him to act. But if he doesn't, your distance won't change anything. And that truth is a blessing, not a loss. Men feel distance as consequence, not as drama, not as emotion, as consequence. And consequences are what shape behavior. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain how hurt you are. When you pull your energy back, the message delivers itself, and the power in this is subtle. You're not shutting down. You're not being cold. You're simply choosing not to overextend yourself. You're choosing peace over proving. And that quiet confidence is something a man can't ignore, even if he tries. Distance also shifts the emotional balance. When you stop chasing clarity, you stop putting him in control of your feelings. You stop waiting for responses. You stop checking your phone. And that internal shift changes how you show up. You're calmer, you're grounded, and that energy is felt immediately. A man may not respond right away. He may test the space. He may pull back even more at first. That's him checking to see if you'll break. But when you don't, when you remain steady, when you don't chase, that's when respect forms. Because consistency and distance shows strength, not manipulation. Men respect women who can walk away emotionally without making noise. They respect women who don't need to announce their value. And distance is the cleanest way to do that. No drama, no confrontation, just a shift. And let me say this clearly. If matching distance causes him to disappear completely, that man was never attached to you. He was attached to the attention you gave him. And the moment that attention stopped flowing freely, there was nothing holding him there. That's not rejection, that's revelation. Distance tells the truth when words fail. It strips away confusion, it exposes intention, and it gives you clarity without costing your dignity. When you understand that men notice distance more than words, you stop trying to convince someone to choose you. You let their actions make the decision for you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you about this second point because this is where the truth always comes out. Matching energy exposes true intentions. You don't have to interrogate anyone. You don't have to demand answers. You don't have to guess where you stand. All you have to do is stop giving more than you're receiving and watch what happens next. See, intentions hide comfortably when one person is doing all the work. When you're always reaching out, always checking in, always forgiving, always adjusting, the other person never has to reveal who they really are. They can sit back and enjoy the benefits without ever proving commitment. But the moment you pull your energy back to match theirs, the mask starts slipping. When you stop initiating every conversation, when you stop making excuses for their absence, when you stop filling the silence, you create a space where truth has nowhere to hide. Because now effort becomes visible. Now interest becomes measurable. Now intentions show up in behavior instead of promises. A man who is serious about you will feel that shift immediately. He won't like the imbalance. He won't be comfortable with the distance. He'll step in to restore connection because he doesn't want to lose his place in your life. His actions will get louder. His communication will get clearer. Not because you asked him to, but because he wants to. But a man who was never truly invested will react differently. He'll become passive. He'll wait. He'll assume you'll eventually come back around. And when you don't, he'll slowly fade away. That's not confusion. That's exposure. That's you seeing exactly how much you meant to him when the effort was no longer one-sided. Matching energy is powerful because it removes emotion from the equation. You're no longer begging for reassurance. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're simply observing. And observation is dangerous for anyone who isn't genuine. People reveal themselves when they're required to contribute. When you stop overgiving, you stop enabling half effort. And half effort can't survive without someone else carrying it. The relationship either balances itself or it collapses. Either way, you win clarity. Now, let's be honest. This part is uncomfortable because when you match energy, you risk discovering a truth you may not want to face. You risk realizing that someone enjoyed your presence but never intended to commit, and that hurts. But it hurts far less than staying in a connection where you're constantly guessing your value. A man's intentions are shown through consistency, not words. Anybody can say they care. Anybody can say they're busy. Anybody can say they'll do better. But when you step back and give him room to show up, the truth becomes undeniable. If he wants you, you'll know. If he doesn't, you'll know that too. Matching energy also shifts the emotional power dynamic. You stop being reactive. You stop waiting for his mood to determine your peace. You stop measuring yourself by how much attention you're getting. And that emotional independence is something men feel immediately. When you don't chase, when you don't press, when you don't complain, the responsibility shifts to him. He has to decide what role he wants to play. He has to decide if he's going to step up or step aside. And whatever choice he makes tells you everything you need to know. Some men will test you. They'll do just enough to see if you'll go back to giving more. A random text, a vague promise, a breadcrumb of attention. This is where matching energy requires discipline. Because if you overreact to small effort, you reset the cycle. But if you stay consistent, if you don't reward inconsistency, his true intentions will surface quickly. Matching energy is not about being cold. It's about being fair. It's about giving the same level of effort you receive. And fairness scares people who were benefiting from imbalance. When you stop compensating for someone else's lack of effort, they are forced to confront their own behavior. And here's something important. When a man realizes he has to earn access to you again, respect enters the picture. Respect doesn't come from overgiving. It comes from boundaries. It comes from self-control. It comes from knowing your value and refusing to bargain it away. If matching energy causes him to become more present, more consistent, more intentional, then you've learned something powerful. If it causes him to disappear, you've learned something even more powerful. Either way, you're no longer living in confusion, because confusion exists only when one person is investing more than the other. The moment effort becomes equal, clarity shows up. And that clarity gives you freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to walk away, freedom to stay without anxiety. Matching energy doesn't manipulate a man. It reveals him. It brings intentions into the light. And once you see the truth, you're no longer guessing. You're deciding. Ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to talk about this third point. And it's a powerful one. Silence forces reflection and curiosity. Most people underestimate the power of saying nothing. They think communication is all about talking, explaining, clarifying over and over. But silence is magnetic. Silence is disruptive. Silence makes people think. Silence makes them feel. And it's one of the strongest tools you can use to understand a man's true intentions. See, when you step back and stop filling the space with words, texts, or calls, it creates a vacuum. And humans, especially men, don't like vacuums. Their minds start to wander. They start to replay moments. They start to notice things they took for granted when you were always present. Silence gives them the room to reflect on what they're doing and who they're losing. Think about it. When someone is constantly available, they become part of the background. They blend into the routine. They are expected. And when something is expected, it is not valued. But when you stop always being there, when you stop reacting instantly, your absence stands out. Your energy, your presence, and the impact you have are suddenly highlighted. And that's when curiosity begins. Curiosity is a powerful thing. A man who notices your silence begins to ask himself questions he never asked before. Why isn't she texting me? Why did she stop responding like she used to? Did I take her for granted? And those questions force reflection. They force him to analyze his actions and his choices. And D, once reflection enters, intention and behavior follow. Silence also shifts the dynamic in a relationship. You're no longer the one chasing clarity, you're the one observing. You're no longer the one proving your worth, you're the one setting the standard. And that shift in energy makes a man reconsider how he's showing up, because he can feel it. He can sense that you're no longer moving for him, that you're no longer giving freely without reciprocity, and that changes everything. Now, some men will react immediately. They will reach out, check in, try to reconnect, and show you the attention they weren't giving before. Others may withdraw, unsure of how to handle the sudden distance. And that's the point. Silence filters out those who are only interested in convenience and attention from those who are serious about effort and commitment. Silence is a mirror, reflecting the truth of a man's intentions without you ever saying a word. Silence also teaches patience, and patience is powerful. When you stop reacting impulsively to every text, every call, every sign of attention, you train yourself to observe instead of chase. And observation is where clarity comes from. You notice patterns. You notice consistency or the lack of it. You notice who is truly invested and who is simply passing time. And that insight is invaluable because it saves you from wasting energy on someone who isn't serious. Another thing people miss about silence is that it creates emotional space for both parties. When you step back, you give yourself room to process your own feelings and energy. You're no longer caught up in the stress of needing validation from him. You're no longer dependent on constant communication to feel secure. And in that calm, centered state, you are more attractive than ever. Men are drawn to stability. They are drawn to someone who has control of their emotions and isn't constantly reacting. Silence also invites curiosity in subtle ways. A man may start to think about the things he didn't appreciate before. He may reflect on the conversations you had, the moments you shared, the way you made him feel. And those reflections can lead to action. The absence of your energy creates space for him to want to fill the gap, to restore the connection, to show up in ways he wasn't before. it's important to understand that silence is not manipulation. It's not playing games. It's not punishing. It's about creating a natural consequence for behavior. When someone is not showing up equally, when effort is one-sided, silence communicates without words that imbalance exists. It forces reflection because it removes comfort and expectation, and reflection leads to clarity. Now, let's be real. Silence can be uncomfortable at first, both for you and for him. You may feel the urge to explain yourself, to reach out, to make sure he knows you're okay. But resisting that urge is what gives silence its power. When you remain steady in your energy, when you do not react to every impulse, you allow space for growth, both for yourself and for him. Some men will resist the reflection that silence forces. They may test your boundaries. They may act out or disappear completely. But again, that's the point. Silence filters. It separates those who are invested from those who are indifferent. It exposes the truth without confrontation. And the truth, ladies and gentlemen, is always better than uncertainty. When you master silence, you also master yourself. You stop living in constant reaction. You stop bending to someone else's energy. You regain control of your emotions. And that confidence, that calm, that stability, it's magnetic. Men notice it, they respect it. And the ones who are truly serious will step up because they feel the absence of what they cannot take for granted. Silence is more than just not talking. It's a powerful tool for testing intentions, for observing behavior, and for creating the kind of energy that forces a man to evaluate his own choices. It allows him to see what life would be like without you actively chasing, without you always giving, without you always accommodating. And that perspective is priceless because it's often the only thing that sparks real change. So remember this, silence forces reflection and curiosity. It's not weakness, it's not coldness, it's strategy wrapped in authenticity. It's about protecting your peace, reclaiming your energy, and allowing truth to emerge naturally. When you understand the power of silence, you stop chasing illusions and you start seeing people exactly as they are. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's dive into this fourth point because this is where real power begins to show itself. Chasing stops when effort is no longer guaranteed. So many people get caught up in the idea that love or attention can be forced, that if you just try harder, give more, or plead enough, someone will finally match your energy. But the truth is, no one ever respects what is handed to them on a silver platter. Effort must be mutual. When you stop chasing, when you stop trying to force connection, the natural balance comes forward, and the results can be eye-opening. See, chasing is exhausting. It drains you emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even spiritually. When you are constantly the one reaching out, constantly initiating, constantly bending to someone else's schedule or mood, you are giving away your power. And here's the thing, people will get used to it. They will rely on it. They will start taking you for granted. Chasing creates dependency, but it's never the kind of dependency that brings respect. It's the kind that fosters entitlement. And entitlement is a killer of real connection. When effort is no longer guaranteed, you stop overextending yourself for someone who doesn't value your time, your attention, or your presence. You stop begging for validation that should be freely given. And the moment you stop, something remarkable happens. Men or anyone in a relationship with you are forced to confront their own choices. They are forced to reflect on whether they truly want to be present or if they were only comfortable because you made it easy. This is the point where the truth reveals itself. If someone was only invested in the benefits of your energy, the benefits of your availability, the perks of your attention, they will begin to fade. They will pull away. And it hurts at first, yes, but that hurt is necessary because it exposes reality. It shows you who is willing to step up when they have to, and who was only willing to coast along while you carried the weight. Chasing stops when effort is no longer guaranteed because the moment you step back, the imbalance becomes visible. You no longer create a one-sided relationship where one person carries the emotional labor and the other floats comfortably. When you withhold the chase, you are not being cruel. You are not punishing. You are simply creating a natural consequence for behavior. If he is serious, he will move to restore balance. If he is not, his absence confirms what your instincts have been telling you all along. And let me tell you something else, ladies and gentlemen. When chasing stops, the emotional power shifts. You are no longer operating from need or desperation. You are operating from self-respect and clarity. You become the observer rather than the participant in the constant anxiety of wondering if he cares enough. And that shift in energy is something men feel immediately. They may not be able to articulate it, but they notice when the dynamic changes, when the effort is no longer unilateral and it forces them to confront themselves. Chasing also masks true intentions. When you are the one constantly initiating, a man's lack of effort can be hidden by your overcompensation. You make up for what he doesn't give. You excuse behavior that wouldn't be excused if the roles were reversed. You allow imbalance to continue because you want connection, even if it comes at the cost of your self-respect. But when effort is no longer guaranteed, you remove that mask. You no longer compensate. You stop covering gaps. And what you see is the reality of his investment, or lack thereof. There's also a psychological truth here. People value what they work for. When you chase someone endlessly, it becomes too easy for them to take you for granted. Your energy, your attention, your care, your presence, it all becomes expected. But when you pull back and stop chasing, you create scarcity. And scarcity creates value. Now he has to ask himself, do I want to step up? Do I want to show that I'm serious? Do I want to put in effort before it's too late? Some men will rise to the occasion. They will start matching your energy. They will initiate, communicate, and demonstrate the respect and care that should have been there all along. Others will vanish quietly, revealing that their presence was conditional, their affection was situational, and their intentions were never genuine. And that's not a loss, that's clarity. That's insight into your own life and the people you allow into it. Stopping the chase is also empowering because it restores emotional control. You no longer tie your happiness to someone else's inconsistent behavior. You no longer allow your mood, your self-esteem, or your sense of worth to fluctuate based on someone else's choices. Instead, you become steady, you become calm, you become magnetic, and that calm, steady energy draws the people who are truly aligned with you while filtering out those who aren't. Chasing stops when effort is no longer guaranteed because at the end of the day, relationships thrive on reciprocity, not desperation. Real connection cannot survive one-sided energy for long. When you step back, you are giving the other person an opportunity to show their real intentions, to prove that they value the relationship, and to contribute equally. If they don't, you are given the gift of knowing the truth without needing to argue, manipulate, or demand it. And let's be honest, the freedom that comes from no longer chasing is life-changing. You reclaim your time, your energy, and your focus. You stop overanalyzing every word, every message, every action. You stop compromising your peace for someone else's inconsistency. And in that space, clarity, respect, and self-love flourish. You learn that the right people will meet you where you are, not just expect you to meet them where they are. So remember this, when effort is no longer guaranteed, chasing stops. And when chasing stops, power, clarity, and true understanding of intentions emerge. The people who are meant to stay will step forward. The ones who aren't will show themselves. And you, ladies and gentlemen, will finally see relationships for what they really are, not what you hope them to be. You'll stop giving endlessly to those who take endlessly, and you'll start valuing yourself in a way that forces everyone else to do the same.